Committee will come back to order. We have pending an en bloc amendment for five separate amendments. As I understand it, there are two of the five for which there's no opposition. And I'd like to put the vote on those two, and then we'll recognize members to discuss the other three. Mr. Welch? What, pardon? The two are amendment by Ms. Eshoo and Mr. Rogers, called the Energy Efficient Information and Communications Technology, and the one of the two amendments by Ms. Baldwin. This is the Motor Market Assessment Commercial Awareness Program. Are we ready for the vote on those two amendments?
This is it.
All those in favor of those two amendments will say aye. 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 Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendments are agreed to. Now we have three pending amendments en bloc, and the chair would like to see who would like to be recognized to discuss any of those three amendments. Mr. Shimkus, did you want to speak on those amendments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm not going to take a lot of time, but on each one of these, there's just a couple questions and a couple points. One is on the amendment offered by Mr. Welch and Mr. Gett, the national energy efficiency goals. I guess the first question would be, what is the goals based on? Can anyone answer that question? This is Mr. Welch, and I'll yield to Mr. Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Shimkus. There have been a couple of studies, one by the United Nations Foundation, that concluded...
That doesn't help me. Just a joke. Go ahead. Sorry.
Was the answer? That suggests that just under the present arrangement, we could likely get efficiency improvements of 1.2%. And the goal here is, in effect, the challenge to raise that to 2.5%.
Yeah, can I just follow up? And why 2.5? 1.2 to 2.5? Why? How did we grab 2.5 out of the air?
Well, I'll tell you, a lot of us thought it could be higher. So the goal, you've got to pick a number. And 2.5 is about 40% above what, under present arrangements, without the passage of this legislation, without an aggressive effort to actually invest in efficiency. And this bill is going to take steps.
Can I follow up on that? I'm going to try to make good use of the time. Is there any scientific study that talks about the I yield my time to Mr. Gett.
Yes, thank you. The UN Foundation did a report that showed that we could increase energy efficiency by 2.5%. And if we did that in just the G8 countries, then we would reduce G8 energy demand by about 20% in 2030. It's important to note that in Mr. Welch's and my amendment, this is a goal. It's not a requirement. And so we think that under the UN report, it's doable. Energy efficiency is one of the least recognized but most effective way to meet our challenges, and so we think that this is a reasonable amount.
Can I? And if I could follow up with any one of the authors, what happens with this plan once it's developed? I yield my time to Mr. Welch.
I don't know what.
Mr. Welch, your mic's not on.
Thank you. The information is provided by the Secretary of Energy and EPA to Congress. It allows us kind of an...
Is that to each member's office? No, that's just another joke.
Well, you'll find it, Mr. Shimkus. Basically, it's about, one, setting a goal, and then two, tracking the information as to how we're achieving the goal. And it also would break down information by different type of activity so that we could assess as we're going along what's working better in one place versus another. So really it's about having a goal for efficiency and then tracking it to see how successful we are with our policies to achieve greater efficiency.
And I appreciate my time is quickly expiring, and I want to thank the two authors. You've answered a lot of questions, and I appreciate that. Let me go to Ms. Matsui, who's obviously my colleague and co-author of DERA, which we have been celebrating over the last couple of days. This amendment, in essence, is going to pay utilities to plant trees. Is that correct?
Actually, what it does is have a grant program, in essence, and federal monies go to that, and it has to be matched 1-for-1 for private monies.
So the whole premise of the cap and trade, which would then have money and people purchasing credits to forest the nation as a carbon sequestration type of product, this would be in addition to, is this not duplicative? I guess that's the question.
This is not the right one. Yeah.
I mean, the
No.
problem with the bill is we're piling on numerous issues, and it seems like if the cap and trade system works,
Well,
then why do we have this program that takes off additional money?
It is not duplicative. The U.S. Forest Service already runs, obviously, the urban community forestry program, but its intent is simply to increase the number of urban trees in this country, not to drive up building efficiency and drive down ratepayer cost. So, you know, we've heard a lot about the little guy from the colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and if this amendment is adopted, it would be a perfect example of how we're looking out for the little guy, because it'll lower the amount of money consumers pay for electricity.
Gentlemen,
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just, and I'm be finished with, I got one more. There's three
without
amendments.
objection, the gentleman will be given another 1 minute. That'll be the order.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would just say, I'm the one who's raising the little guy debate, and I would just say that giving grants to corporations to plant trees doesn't seem like it's helping the little guy. On the last amendment, which is by Ms. Baldwin, I think my colleague, Mr. Whitfield, did a great job of identifying that there's $2.8 trillion already authorized in this bill, and there is concern for many of us about the additional authorization. $80 million for 2011, $75 million 2012, $70 million for 2013, $65 million for 2014. There's going to be a time when we cannot pay for all the funding that we're incurring, and that's why rates increase. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Any, yes, gentlelady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's Ms. Blackburn from Tennessee. And I move to strike the last word.
You're not just the gentlelady? Gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn.
Thank you, sir.
Recognized for 5 minutes.
I do have a couple of questions I would like to ask Ms. Matsui, if I may do so, on her amendment. I find the amendment such an interesting take on, and I do look at this and see it as being very duplicative and redundant in its efforts. You know, I come from a family that has always participated enormously in conservation efforts, whether it was Farm Bureau 4-H Club or my mother with Garden Clubs of America. My mother received the Keep America Beautiful Lifetime Achievement Award in 1997 for the work that she has done starting programs exactly like the gentlelady from California is mentioning in her bill. Now, we have wonderful not-for-profits that go about this work, and she does reference them in her bill. But these organizations for decades have been planting trees. So, in addition to the U.S. Forest Service carrying out some of this good work, we have garden clubs all around the country. We have Boy Scout and Girl Scout clubs that work on Arbor Days, planting trees. So is it the gentlelady's intent that all of these organizations will be able to draw down this $1 for dollar match? Would they use that to grow their programs, or would this have the unintended consequence of doing away with the corporate contributions that they receive, the charitable contributions they receive in order to help carry out those programs? Have we thought through what that would do to these not-for-profits who have for decades been engaged in this type of work? And I yield to the gentlelady for a response.
Yes, I'd like to respond. First of all, I really appreciate garden clubs also, and I think they really fill a wonderful place in our communities. The critical difference between my amendment and things like garden clubs, and the reason we need the amendment, is because utilities need to plant the right tree in the right place in order to get the kind of efficient...
Reclaiming my time. So then the individuals that put a lot of work into these efforts, our assumption, the arrogance of an assumption by us in Congress would be that these volunteers do not plant the trees in the right place. And I just would have a tremendous amount of concern about what this would do to these organizations that put effort into carrying forth these programs, even began these programs. We
Gentlelady, yield to me.
Yes, I'll be happy to yield.
I would think those groups would welcome this proposal. It's a voluntary one. It's not mandatory. They're doing the best job they can, and I'm pleased to hear about your mother's involvement. They do a great service. They make our communities more livable. What this proposal would do is no mandate, but it's an option for local utility companies who want to reduce consumer energy bills. They can do it through tree planting. And when you get shade from trees, less electricity is used. So if a utility wants to do that, as I understand it, they have to match the money, and they know that they're helping their ratepayers save money. So I think groups, volunteer groups are great, and they're doing the best they can, but this would help, and I think utilities would probably want to engage them in the activity.
I thank the chairman for the explanation, and I reclaim my time. I think that as we look at taking a program that has been very successful in the not-for-profit sector and pulling that in, institutionalizing it, and making it a government program, that we need to be very careful about how we go about that. I would think that we would not want to take steps that are going to hurt the not-for-profit sector and their good work, diminishing the work they've done while we say global warming and fighting global warming and paying umbrage to global warming is the objective of the legislation that we're bringing forward. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Okay, the chair will recognize himself. I'd be interested in whether you think that faith-based initiatives have harmed the religious and volunteer groups that were doing great things in the community, running drug abuse programs and other things that where they served a very worthwhile purpose, and the government wanted to have them do the work and not set up government agencies to do it. So I just show you a different aspect of it. I hear what you're saying, and I wouldn't want those nonprofit groups to be pushed out of the way at all, but I think this would expand it. We'd have more opportunities for people to do things together. I hope we will. I just want to give you a different explanation. Further discussion on the amendments.
Chairman?
Who seeks recognition?
Oh, the gentleman from Vermont is on it. But then after him, I would like to.
Mr. Welch, are you seeking recognition? The gentleman's recognized.
Just briefly, I just want to speak to the National Efficiency Improvement Goals. You know, we've been having a very contentious debate about the climate, about the consumers, and about jobs that will be affected. And efficiency is a means of doing three things that we all agree need to be done. We want to protect the climate. We obviously want to provide relief to the consumer. Lower electric bills will do that. And we want to create jobs. And efficiency, by definition, requires investment in local economies. And the folks who have those jobs are your local electrician, local plumber, local mechanic. And what this National Energy Efficient Goals amendment does, and I thank Diana DeGette and Chris Murphy, what it does is state very explicitly something that is important for this country to do, and that is to pursue efficiency for the benefits that are ours to be had if we make the effort. And it can be something that unifies us, because you're a winner whether you're in a coal state, in a hydro state, in an oil state. So I thank my co-sponsors, and at this point would like to yield to the member from Colorado, Diana DeGette.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank the sponsor for his leadership. Just to add, the other thing our amendment does is it requires the Secretary to develop a strategic plan based on based on these goals and to see how we can achieve them. I think Mr. Welch and I would both agree that as we move along, energy efficiency is really sort of the low-hanging fruit of this whole debate. And if people really work towards energy efficiency, then we will achieve our goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and also, most importantly, will save consumers money and stimulate the local economies. I wish we could do more with efficiency, but I think this is a good first start in this bill. And Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you and everybody else to improve efficiency standards as best we can. And with that, I'll yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Terry?
Oh. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I have to hand it to the authors. This seems very thorough. It goes in and makes sure that anyone who is going to be planting the trees is going to be properly certified and knowing the proper distance to plant the tree from a building foundation and air conditioning units and driveways and property fences and pre-existing utility infrastructures, any septic systems, swimming pools. They've got to have a certain education, I think, on eligibility. So I commend them for the thoroughness. A couple of things that stood out to me that I want to ask about is, first of all, I understand maybe not the rest of the country is intelligent as Nebraskans, but if we want to plant a tree in our yard to help shade it, we pretty well know it's west to northwest, so we can save some time here. To block the winter winds, it's north side of the house, but size does matter with trees and being able to accomplish this. So, you know, having the retail generator pay for a nice little red bud tree in my front yard on the northwest corner will make my yard look very beautiful, but will do absolutely nothing for energy efficiency. So the one thing that I didn't see in here is size of trees, deciduous versus pine. Of course, in Nebraska, having trees that drop leaves in the winter on the north side of your house is fairly meaningless. So even though it's how many pages, 15 pages on how to plant trees and the conditions for being able to meet and actually receive grant monies to plant the tree, I was wondering if size was part of the discussion.
The gentleman yield.
Yes.
Why would you think a utility would take up this option? They have to put in some of their own money to do this tree planting. The idea is that they would plant it so that there'd be less electricity used because of the shade. They don't have to do it.
What credit do they receive?
What credit do they receive?
They get to plant a tree, and maybe,
And they have
Mr.
to put in some
Chairman,
money
it's
to
like
do it.
The Arbor Day Foundation that gave my 8-year-old a tree, a nice pine tree that was 4 inches tall. You know, that's going to be 20 years before it has any effect.
Well, they'll probably
Do
have
we
to
get to
plant
pay $200 for a 6-inch pine tree?
No, we'll probably have to do more fully grown trees, huh?
But it doesn't say
They
that
have
in
those
here.
in Nebraska.
And I guess the bottom line, Mr. Chairman, is I think we're getting silly now. I yield back.
Okay. Any further recognition on this amendment? Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I hopefully won't take much time here, but this is, I think, what strikes us as odd about this whole bill and is very symptomatic of the problem with this. You use the word, it's their own money. So let me get this right. They have a guaranteed rate of return of which even this bill authorizes to go back to ratepayers in order to recoup their costs. So ratepayers pay for half the tree. Then we create a new government program that's a lot more expensive to even find, get the tree, get the contract to get the tree to the place of which ratepayers are paying half. And oh, by the way, taxpayers are paying for the other half of the tree, which are ratepayers. I mean, you have just charged the bill to the very people you're saddling with the largest energy tax in the history of the United States. And your logic, and I do assume you believe it, is, no, it's free, it's great, it's wonderful, nobody really pays for it. This comes out of somebody's pocket for a shade tree. And if it saves money, I'll guarantee you somebody's clever enough to go plant the tree themselves without a large, very regulated government mandate about how they, the size of the tree, the scope of the tree, and where the tree goes. It is ludicrous. And this is absolutely exemplary of why this bill is so bad. I mean, it went from a climate change bill to a global warming bill. Now it's not quite that yesterday. Now it's a jobs bill. No, it's not really a jobs bill. Now it's a new energy bill. No, it's a tax bill on people who are trying to make it back home.
Gentleman yield.
You can have the remainder of my time, Mr. Chairman. You can tell why we're frustrated, because people back home are paying for every single penny of this, unless, of course, you're in a district, as Mr. Booyer pointed out, where you've exempted yourselves. I would yield you the remainder of my time.
Thank you very much for yielding, and I do sense the frustration that you must have. But I think Mr. Scalise was very wise when he said yesterday, I believe it was Mr. Scalise, if you dig a hole, I believe you ought to plant a tree.
on top of the ratepayer, apparently.
All right. Any further discussion? Are we ready for the vote? I think we're ready for the vote. Mr. Murphy, well, we'll recognize you. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very briefly, I wanted to get back to Mr. Welsh's amendment and speak very quickly in support of it. It's been said that this country is the Saudi Arabia of energy consumption, and Mr. Welsh's amendment, which I'm happy to join him on, is, I think, a very important reminder to us that some of the greatest savings that we can immediately achieve is through energy efficiency. We have a small little company headquartered in Connecticut, United Technologies, which has expanded greatly over the past 3 to 4 years, and at the same time has had a net reduction in their energy consumption and their water consumption, vastly disproportional to the excess production happening at that facility. It's because they've invested the time in trying to figure out ways to do things more efficiently. In the RGGI cap and trade system in New England and northeastern states, by putting almost all of the revenues from those auctions back into energy efficiency, we have kept the rate base and the rates for consumers relatively stable, because we have pushed down and are going to continue to push down the demand side of our energy market, which will counterbalance against some of the pass-throughs due to the auction prices. Energy efficiency has so far to go in this country, and by simply setting a goal here, I think we're reminding everyone, from end consumers to those that are producing the energy in the first place, who are often wasting more energy in producing it than they actually send out onto the grid, that we can do so much to try to get to the goals in this bill through energy efficiency, and I'm thankful to Representative Welsh and others for bringing it before us today.
Will the gentleman yield to Ms. Castor?
Absolutely. I yield the balance of my time to Ms. Castor.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to speak in favor of Ms. Matsui's amendment, because in Florida, our per capita residential electricity demand is among the highest in the country, largely because of air conditioning use. We need air conditioning desperately during the summer months. And when you combine that with poorly insulated homes that are inefficient, it causes us to use far more energy than we need. And we know that throughout the entire country that heating and cooling of homes accounts for nearly 60% of residential electricity use. So when you're able to plant a tree in a strategic location in concert with the utility, this is a cost-saving proposal for consumers. What's more cost efficient, to target a few subdivisions and plant trees to save energy, or do you have to replace your AC equipment with higher load capacity? It's much more efficient to plant a few trees. This is an important consumer provision, and I thank Ms. Matsui for offering it today.
Time is yielded back. We'll now proceed to a vote on the following 3 amendments in block. Baldwin, Amendment Number 40, the Motor Efficiency Rebate Program. Matsui, 35, Tree Planting Program. Welch, Daggett, Murphy, 96, the National Energy Efficiency Goals. All those in favor of the amendments in block will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendments are agreed to.